Have you been afraid to do vendor debriefings for fear of telling a vendor their proposal wasn't good enough? It's easy to worry about negative reactions, but giving feedback can lead to better vendor relationships and better competition for your future RFPs. In this video, we'll go over how to do debriefings without having a vendor jump over the table at you. Hello and welcome. I am Catherine Corin, your procurement guide to public sector procurement in Canada. I've been working in the public sector for the last 24 plus years, prior to that in the private sector in procurement, and I have lots of stories, tips, and tricks to help you on your journey. When I used to teach procurement courses for the PCMP, the topic of debriefings was one of those topics that people always said they were afraid to do. And even when we were training new procurement staff in our procurement shared services, there was always a fear. And the thing us more experienced people would say, well, what is it you're afraid of? I alluded to in the beginning about a vendor jumping over the table. In the hundreds I've done, I've only had 3 not go as well as planned. If your process was done correctly, there's nothing to fear. However, people are afraid of giving negative feedback, having a negative reaction. So why do we do them? It's a vendor development opportunity, and it's an education opportunity and relationship building because so much is done written. This is the only time we really truly get that one-on-one discussion with a vendor to build that relationship, for them to understand us and our limitations and requirements in a competitive process and how they can do better in future. The more vendors who understand the process and improve upon their proposals, the better the competition and also the better the evaluation process. It is so much easier to evaluate a proposal that is written to the requirements instead of hit or miss or template or marketing fluff. So this also helps us not only get better value, but also in the evaluation process in future processes. We do this under policy in order to ensure that our processes are completely open, fair, and transparent. And again, we're educating them, even though the matrices and how we evaluate and guides to the RFP process are posted publicly. There are very few people who actually read those things. So this is an opportunity to highlight the things that are important and help them understand the process and maybe go read more information afterwards. Also, we have vendors who require feedback for continuous improvement certifications and internal continuous improvement initiatives. Providing this feedback helps them, it helps us. We notify the vendors depending on how long it's going to take to get to a signed contract. And we don't want to delay things too far down the road, because who wants to do a debriefing 6 months after the RFP process? You have to refresh your memory again. What's logical in the steps of your process? If we think it's going to be a short time before we get to a contract, we'll wait till the contract is signed before we notify everybody and give them an opportunity to request a debriefing. If it's going to be months down the road, then we're going to notify them with the caveat that their proposals are still binding. If it's going to take us 3 months to sign a contract, all those unsuccessful vendors, if we don't notify them, are sitting on their resources so they can provide you with the people they proposed. It's kind of unfair to have those people in a holding pattern for 3 months waiting to find out they didn't win the contract. On the other side, if you don't get that signed contract, and you've notified them immediately and they've released their resources to work on other projects, and you can't get that contract signed and you're going to second place, oh, sorry, my people aren't available. So there are templates the various provinces, federal government have in both those scenarios. Because if you're going to notify them before you have a signed contract, you're going to make sure that they understand that their proposal is still binding. They can deploy their people under the assumption that, we may get called back. So who gets offered a debriefing? Everyone who responded to your RFP, with some caveats. When you send out the notifications, those that did not meet the mandatories, you are going to state in their notification letter what mandatory they missed and explain to them that their proposal was not evaluated further. Technically, that is their debriefing. You're not offering a phone call or debriefing process to them because you did not evaluate their proposal. Next is those that did not meet a minimum score. You have evaluated their proposal, so you can offer them a debriefing by phone, but it depends on how many responses you got. Like if you've only had 6 to 12 and not everybody asked for a debriefing, then you could give debriefings to those that didn't meet the minimum score in order to help them get to that minimum score next time. However, if you had 40 responses, and we've had some processes go higher than that even, then those that didn't meet minimum score, it might be best to give them an outline, a summary debriefing, which we'll explain some more later in the video. You can give them that summary with their notification letter rather than booking a debriefing time, and just advise them, please contact us if you have any further questions. Then there's the rest that met the minimum scores but were not successful, and the successful if they want. In the case of the unsuccessful, you're going to give them debriefing offerings. And the successful sometimes will ask for one as well. And I actually had a case in Victoria, BC, where there was this IT firm that kept winning all the time. And they always asked for a debriefing because they wanted to stay ahead of the curve. And in fact, their proposal writing team was flown to Ottawa because this particular office of this firm had the highest success rates with RFPs. So that proposal writing team got flown to Ottawa to help them respond to RFPs in Ottawa. So even if they're successful, they may ask for one. And again, to my earlier point, if they have a continuous improvement certification or initiative, they need continuous feedback in order to continually improve. Next is the timing and how you're going to book these debriefing meetings. So when you send out the notifications, generally in the notification template, there'll be a line about requesting debriefings. Set a deadline for requesting those debriefings. Usually I will give a week to 10 days for them to respond back requesting their debriefing. So we aren't getting requests months down the road and having to revisit the proposals. But if we get the request within a week to 10 days, then we compile how many debriefings do we have to do. We compile the information, and I'll get into that a little bit after this, but block the calendars of the people who are going to attend the debriefing from your organization. Generally, procurement will be there, and one or two evaluators so that they can speak to what they scored or any technical questions specifically. Generally, the debriefings, we give a limit of 30 minutes and try to do them by phone or Teams. Sometimes you'll do them as in-person debriefings when it's really in the millions of dollars or really large and complex, like drawn out process. offer a face-to-face debriefing, but those ones have a whole other logistical challenge of people traveling, booking meeting rooms, and separating the debriefing time so one vendor isn't leaving when another one is coming in. It's similar to vendor presentations. There's a lot more logistical challenges in those cases. So a lot of times it is more economical, more efficient to do a face-to-face virtually using Teams, Zoom, WebEx, or whatever platform the vendor or your organization may have. You block 30 minutes for the debriefing, but in my experience, most are finished within 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the number of questions that the vendor may have afterwards or how much they want to talk afterwards. And you want to give a little bit of time between meetings so you're not rushing at the end to jump into the next call. In order to coordinate even that many debriefings across calendars, I will go in sequence of who requested first and offer them 3 options from what we've blocked in the calendars. Then go the next person with 3 offers and 3. And then that way they get a choice within their calendar. You're also going to send them a confirmation of their time, again confirming that this is not a time to contest the decision. This is an opportunity to learn about the process and strengths and areas for improvement on their proposal only. There will be no discussion about other proposals. You will ask them to confirm who from their side will be attending and request contact information just in case there's a technology outage or something. Knowing who is attending from their side is helpful because if they are going to have legal representation there, you do not want to go into a debriefing without your own legal representation. You have to be careful with that. You may have your own internal policies about that. So that leads me to what is in a debriefing and what are you going to say in the debriefing. So before the debriefing meeting, I will create a debriefing summary. I will have an agenda and I will list the topics that we're going to go through, introductions, the process of evaluation in a general sense in government, that we can only assess what's in the proposal against what the criteria was. It has to stand up to a third-party audit. We cannot use any outside information or knowledge about the vendor. It can only be the written proposal against the criteria. That is a key thing for vendors to understand because sometimes they'll write their proposals assuming, well, you've worked with me in past, you know I can do this. Spelling that out up front in the agenda helps them understand we have to only score what's in the written proposal against our criteria, and it has to stand up to a third-party audit from someone who does not know them. It's also a fairness thing because if we know one vendor, not another one, how do you treat them equally if you're not just going by the written proposal? Next, I also go into most common issues we see in proposals as a generalization. So vendors don't feel like when we get to the areas for improvement that they're being picked on, that they understand that this is a common issue across proposals until people learn. And explaining the scoring matrix, that it's either a 0 to 5 or a 0 to 10 scale. And a lot of times meets requirements is in the middle. So it's not like school that you get an A for doing a great proposal. Meets requirements on the 0 to 10 scale is a 6 out of 10. Some people may see that as 60% and be offended by it. But if you explain it up front how the scoring matrix works, it's publicly available, it'll be more helpful for the later discussion. And then you're going to let them know, I'm going to give you a summary of all this afterwards, and let's get into your proposal so that they're not busy trying to write everything down. I will give you all this afterwards. So you get into their strengths. So these are the areas you scored really well on. This is what to keep doing. And then you go into areas for improvement. Some people will call it weaknesses. I think that's off-putting. That's just me personally thinking it's off-putting. So I try to call it areas for improvement, where they scored lower, where they were missing information, where they could augment demonstrating better, or, you stated it, but you didn't demonstrate it with an action statement or answer the full question, et cetera, et cetera. Or if the only thing really that they fell down on was price, just say, ultimately it was price. Then you ask them, do you have any further questions? They may ask you for things that you may have to get back to them. It's much better to say, let me get back to you on that. Sometimes what they ask you for, you have to verify if it's releasable information. If they ask you about other vendor proposals, we cannot speak to other vendor proposals. All we can do is just speak to yours. The proposals are not compared. They are scored, again, to what you said in the beginning, written proposal against requirements. You can tell them what their high level scores were based on the matrix that was posted in the RFP. On corporate capabilities, you scored this. On experience of the team, you scored this. On approach, you scored this. Price, this was your score, so your total score was this. The winning proposal total score was this. If they ask for further information, double check your releasable information. BC government, I'll put the link down below to what's releasable in a procurement process when. And federal government, I will find the link to that and put that in the show notes as well. So that is pretty much the debriefing process. As long as you are confident in your process and you create your summary in advance, you know how to approach the strengths and areas for improvement and approach it as a vendor development opportunity, not defensive, defending our decision, it'll go a lot more smoothly. So hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching. Click subscribe, click like, and we'll see you next week.